we welcome you to this first bulletin in the run-up to our eSummit for 2021 as KPMG. I am Alex, and I'm hosting this fireside chat. And together with me is Kenneth Farrugia from the FIAU and Joseph Attard from the MGA. I'd like to thank you for taking part in this bulletin in the run-up to the summit, and we really appreciate your time because we want to always bring fresh insight and also your viewpoints, obviously, for our audience who are the gaming licenses across the island. My view of what we'd like to discuss today is mostly to look at two things. I'd like to bring across our views of the AML CFT risks and how these tie in with the normal principles of risk management of any organization. And in the second instance, I'd like us also to share some experiences around areas where operators are particularly doing well with respect to the AML CFT obligations, and also areas where there needs to be a bit more focus. So starting from the first part of this bulletin, my view on the risks emanating from AML CFT, and I think I would like to hear your views, obviously, there as well. But my views are that risk management and risks are generally something that is endemic to any business, and in the same manner, AML CFT risks are not simply being added on because there is now a regulation that also brings within its scope the gaming operators, but we need to look at the real risks from an AML CFT perspective. And the real risks to me are that a gaming operator might be involved without knowing in a money laundering or financing of terrorism chain because of lack of controls. And I'd like to see whether you feel that this should be the real risks that the operators look at.
So, first of all, Alex, thanks for the invitation to this fire chat. Yes, I fully agree with you with regards to the risks. I think AML CFT risk has been always been taken into consideration by the respective remote gaming operators, and this was not solely driven by the fourth AMLD directive, because a priori when you're applying for a license with the MGA, even previous to the fourth AMLD introduction and obligations, prospective license holder had also to include as part of their business plans and also as part of their controls AML CFT mitigating measures. So and this is not done solely because this is being requested by the prudential supervisor, in this case the MGA, but it's also from a license holder's perspective. I think no institution, no subject person wants to be used as a conduit to launder funds or to channel funds for financing of terrorism. So from that perspective, I think license holder, even from a reputational point of view, cannot risk their business by leaving leaving their business to be used by criminals and by terrorists to channel funds and to launder funds. And in that regards, we have seen huge investments by remote gaming operators in controls and in IT systems to help them pick these instances. And I think this is very important, because if an institution then is even from a reputational perspective, we have heard a lot of instances of scandals around the globe, not solely in Malta but also in other jurisdictions, And these were huge institutions like banks, for example, ABLV in Latvia, if we can mention one example. And I think the reputational aspect is a huge risk. So even from a reputational point of view, I think AML CFT should be always be considered fully by a remote gaming operator.
So precisely, so it is not a simple add-on, it is part of a business and it needs to be managed like any other risks. And speaking of risks, as we all know, we look at the inherent risks first. So those risks which emanate from the business model or from the sector itself. And I wanted to see your views of what you think are the main, if you had to pick, one or two main inherent risks that operators have to deal with by virtue of the fact of the kind of business model, which is obviously in the gaming industry, is different from any other subject person.
Yes, Alex, first of all, likewise, thank you for inviting me over for the fireside chat. And with regards to risks pertinent to gaming, because of the nature of the sector, I think two of the main risks that operators need to be aware of without taking anything away from the remainder of the risks are the jurisdictional and the delivery channel risks. And I think it is very obvious why, because remote gaming, it overlaps, it has a lot of cross-border activity. So it is very easy for anyone in the EU to log into a website, a gaming website from another jurisdiction and interact with a Maltese gaming company. I think the risks need to be evaluated there, particularly the risks pertinent to the jurisdiction in question, but moreover, even the delivery channels. And we all know that the remote sector, the gaming companies, make use of various type of delivery channels, various type of payment methods. So I think there are two critical components which the gaming sector needs to be very much aware of. And in my point of view, they are two of the main risks that make this sector so unique in terms of AML CFT risks. Again, without taking anything away from the customer and product risks, which in themselves, they also pose a threat to money laundering and terrorist financing. However, I think that those two are at the priority list, should be at the priority list of gaming companies.
Okay, so in essence, particularly when you look at the jurisdiction, right, the strength of the license itself is leading to a potential red flag that needs to be given a bit more consideration than in other, let's say, industries, of course, because as you well say, the cross-border element is very, very strong there.
Yes.
And also perhaps related to that, but also because of its nature, the payment kind of risk, it leads to greater volumes, faster payment, more online. So prepaid cards are also very much in use, and that in itself is endemic to the industry more than to others, and that is a red flag that needs to be considered with particular care for gaming operators.
Absolutely.
I think a question that I think a method that comes to mind to our audience, seeing us all here around for this fireside chat, and I've had some comments as well as we work with operators in the industry, is the roles and responsibilities, how they intertwine between the FIAU and the MGA when it comes to supervision from an AML CFT point of view. We all know that there is a lot of collaboration between the two of you, but I think for our audience, it merits us going a bit more into it. So I was wondering whether we can perhaps go a bit into that as well.
Sure. Yes, Alex, I think the more time goes by, the more it becomes clearer how the MGA and the FIAU are collaborating together. I do not believe I don't see any evidence of overlapping procedures. In fact, what happens is that the FIAU does its own risk assessment on all sectors. One of these sectors is purely the gaming sector. pertinent to AML CFT, of course. That risk assessment is handed over to the MGA along with a supervisory plan. A number of operators would be selected for that particular year to undergo an AML CFT examination, and the role of the MGA is then to act as an agent for the FIAU to conduct those AML CFT examinations. It could be independently done by the MGA or in collaboration with the FIAU, and there have been also examinations solely conducted by the FIAU as well. However, there will be no repetition of examinations by both entities. That is surely out of the question. Following the examination and the conducting of the report, when it occurs by the MGA, a report is drafted with all the relevant findings, which is then handed over back to the FIAU, because the FIAU is at the end of the day the ultimate body for AML CFT, and it is the FIAU that determines the findings in terms of breaches and issues the relevant measures, whether that's a remediation measure, supervisory plan, or whatever the case, in terms of breaches and sanctions as well. So it's a harmonized process flow, which is handled by two authorities, which in my opinion, they provide two very important aspects. The FIAU provides its specialty and its expertise in terms of AML CFT, because it's at the end of the day, it handles a lot of data pertinent to that. And the gaming sector is, the MGA is then focused more on the technical aspects. It's got already a relationship with the sector, and it provides a different point of view. And together, I think we covered the whole process flow in a very efficient way.
Just to add something, Alex, and I think Joe went through the whole collaboration process. I think we should also mention that the FIU closely collaborate with both the MGA and also the MFSA from a financial perspective. But with regards to the gaming, our main collaboration is with the MGA. We do collaborate also, even though the MGA is the prudential regulator and we are the AML supervisors, AML CFT supervisors. We cooperate on different fronts, as Joe highlighted, from a supervisory perspective, but then even when it comes to onboarding, licensing, and ongoing due diligence, so we closely collaborate also with the MGA in that regard. And apart from that, we have also worked very closely in terms of training and outreach. As you know, the implementing procedures part 2, which is directly targeted to remote gaming operators, this was done through our collaboration with the MGA. We met with the sector on different times. We provided training together with the MGA, so it's a holistic approach. I think, as Joe highlighted, having the prudential supervisor, which is well conversant with the remote gaming operations, and having the FIU, which is highly conversant with the AML CFT obligations, and having a mix between FIU and MGA provide us with a level of expertise which is highly required, because as you know, remote gaming operators work completely different from the financial, from the NFBPs, and consequently our work is done efficiently and also effectively, because we perform our duties in a time period which is always challenging, as you know, because we need to undertake a number of examinations whilst we ensure effectiveness throughout.
This brings us to another, I think, important topic for our audience. We have mentioned supervisory examinations and your supervision, and obviously this brings to the fore a number of matters. And I think one of some of these matters relates to what the operators are doing well with respect to AML CFT risk mitigation. There will also be some areas which require a bit more attention and care because there is more or some more improvement to be made in this regard. Obviously, the gaming operators came into the sphere of AML CFT regulation around 2 years ago. So there has been some catch-up to be done vis-a-vis other industries who have been part of the AML CFT framework for a longer period. I was going to see from your end, what are those areas that you believe that there should be some more focus on and improvement on, and areas where you see already a lot of improvement and perhaps also some good practice that you would like to share with our audience?
So from a positive perspective, let's put it this way, I think the flexibility of the sector was really amazing. I recall the meetings that we had with the sector. They were very eager to know the obligations a priori so they can tweak and change and include the necessary controls in their IT systems. So I think although, as you have highlighted, the gaming sector, it's relatively new to the obligations of AML CFT, they were really eager to take on board the necessary requirements that we and the MGA were including as obligatory, and together with the respective members from the sector, we agreed on a framework which is highly robust, and I think in that regard they provided not solely their flexibility but also their expertise on how such controls should be inbuilt in their system. And I think that's a very positive aspect. Apart from that, also another important aspect is the reporting, the STR reporting. The gaming sector now, the remote gaming sector, is the highest remitter of STRs to the FIAU, even more than banks. So for a quite number of years, we had the banks, which were the highest remitters of STRs, but now we have the remote gaming operators. So that's all positive, and we really encouraged to continue in that regards. From what we have learned and what we have highlighted in our reviews, and then Joe can further elaborate on other areas maybe. One of the main areas that we are concerned is the transaction monitoring. AML is not does not equal fraud checks. We're not checking credit cards, and it's about a different kind of checks. And in that regards, we had instances, for example, where either the systems were not picking up high-risk transactions, for example. We had instances where the checks, the controls were not actually implemented, and these are very concerning because if first and foremost we had instances where, for example, the transactional the forecasted transactional activity was not requested from the players, so you cannot assess when the controls should be triggered or otherwise. We had instances where the controls were not actually catching or were not up to the desired requirement. So I think ongoing monitoring is an area which can and which should be improved in this regard. With regards to STR reporting, for example, as I have highlighted, although the remote gaming operators are the highest remitters, 68% of these reports are being submitted by only eight remote gaming operators. So that will leave us that the other 33%, which is almost 500 reports, are being sent by another 72 entities. But as you know, the license holders here in Malta does not equate to 80 license holders. So we have a good chunk of remote gaming operators which are not yet submitting any reports, and that is concerning, even when you compare to the other remote gaming operators. Another area which is very important to highlight, and I think it's also very serious. Sometimes we encountered that the MLRO is not fully independent, for example, because the MLRO was also the director of the remote gaming operator, of the remote gaming company, and also the shareholder. So practically the lines of defense, the independence, the governance, then we have serious deficiencies in that regards. And the role of the MLRO is very important, as you know. That is the key person who is conversant, who is our liaison officer within the subject person. So that's very concerning. But I leave it up to Joe, because there are other areas which he can delve into too.
Definitely, yes. Thanks, Kenneth. To add with what Kenneth, because everything that Kenneth has mentioned is, I mean, I'm fully aligned with him, and that is basically what we see as well from our point of view. But to add with that, we also have concerns about the business risk assessment. Now, with regards to the business risk assessment, there are two things. First one is a non-existent business risk assessment, which in my opinion shouldn't be the case now 3 years down the line of her being subject persons. However, there is also instances where we do find a business risk assessment. However, these business risk assessments do not reflect the policies and procedures, or else policies and procedures are documented in line with the business risk assessment, but in practical terms, these are not really being followed. And this gives the impression that consultants and work has been done in terms of identification of risks and the drafting of policies and procedures. However, the effort from the operator itself in order to transpose those into practical, real, tangible operations within the company have not been conducted or are yet to be conducted. What I would like to emphasize is it is not a tick-based approach. It is not something that just because there's an obligation to have a business risk assessment and you have conducted it doesn't mean it's enough, but the operations need to reflect what was identified. So I think that is one of the negative aspects. In terms of a positive note, I think in 3 years' time, there has been a massive culture change. I still remember the first examinations we were conducting in 2018. And then I think we have seen a major shift in a very short time frame. And what I mean by that is experts joining gaming companies, not really focused on the business aspect, but focused on the AML CFT aspect. Very relevant MLROs, new faces joining in, and the type of training that is being done within gaming companies as well, and their presence as well when we do similar sessions as today. So we have seen an uptake of individuals and presence of gaming companies. So the interest is increasing year on year. And I think, as Kenneth said as well, that is reflecting in the submissions of STRs as well, even though we need to fix that aspect that Kenneth has mentioned, that only a small portion of gaming companies are submitting STRs. There are more, of course, companies which are still yet to get to that point. But I think the culture is obviously changing. The culture is evident that it is adapting and educating itself even more in terms of AML CFT specifically to gaming. We have seen experts coming from the financial sector, joining the gaming sector. They're bringing in a different perspective, adapting to a new sector, and increasing the mechanisms and the level of defenses of these gaming companies.
Okay, and having gone through areas for improvement and areas that have already improved, one of the requirements set out in our regulations are is that of independent audit on the AML CFT. So focused on the AML CFT, which could be part of internal audit. It could also be externalized or outsourced. And a question that comes to mind listening to what you're saying is, how prevalent are you seeing this mechanism being put in place, which is at the end of the day a requirement? And also, how value adding do you think such a mechanism is?
Yes, Alex. I think on this front, it is very important to know that having an independent audit is another layer of control. So it's the way I see it is it's preparing the entity for a proper AML CFT examination at the end of the day. Sometimes the same people are working within the same company, of course. They are seeing a particular point of view. They are working very hard into a particular framework and going into a particular path. However, by bringing in an external auditor, you will be having a different point of view, which is going to be critical, because it may shed light on aspects that maybe the MLRO and the team working on with the MLRO on the implementation of the framework itself, on the control, is not that obvious. So I highly urge that operators do engage independent audits, and it will prepare. It's like a mock test before the actual examination. We had, unfortunately, operators that when we visited them, they took the examination somewhat lightly because they were somewhat thinking that this is some sort of a guidance, a consultancy. It's not. When the supervisor, when the MGA or the FIAU visits you, it's the actual examination. So it's rather serious. Any findings that we observe, we need to report them, and the relevant actions would need to be taken. So my recommendation to each and every gaming company is to prevent that, to prevent any surprises during examinations, by engaging a proper internal auditor, external auditor, to conduct this mock test and to see where there is room for improvement. And it is not just a one-time exercise. It needs to be done when things change, just the same as the business risk assessment needs to be tweaked and updated whenever new risks emerge, such as new products or new jurisdictions. You should also engage auditors in order to ensure that the right framework is being adopted.
If I can add something, Alex,
Sure,
on this point. I think the whole point about an internal audit function or an external review is to add another level of controls. You know, you're always decreasing the risks. I think it's very important. You can never be risk-free. However, the internal audit can be the yardstick for the institution, for the remote gaming operator to implement change. And change should not be implemented because the FIAU or the MGA picked your institution and came to perform a supervisory examination. It should be an ongoing process to renovate and to always be up to scratch, because as we have highlighted in the beginning, the business risks of not adhering to such obligations is huge, both in terms of reputational and both risk and business risk. So I think having another layer of controls is highly beneficial.
Thank you for that, Kenneth. And so in essence, wrapping up, we've looked at how we should be looking at MLFT risks, whether they're on anodon or not. Then we've journeyed through the inherent risk and also the collaboration that there is between the FIAU and the MGA, looked at areas of improvement in controls and areas where there's already a good stance being taken on. And finally, we've looked at the independent review, internal audit on the AML CFT compliance program, and its prevalence as well, it's the value. I would like to thank you for your time, I know that you take to heart, as you were saying, the outreach to the gaming operators, and this assists us in bringing insight to our audience, who are the gaming operators in Malta, and in our commitment to bring this value add to the gaming operators in the local industry. I'd like to thank you, Kenneth, for taking the time and for your insight, and as well, Joseph, for your contributions today. And we look forward to further similar sessions for our audience and for our in the run-up for our KPMG eSummit, which is going to take place in early 2021. So thank you, and for joining us for this virtual fireside chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.